Tibetan Buddhism is actually very, very Tibetan in terms of culturally Tibetan, but at the same time, it completely is not. So that's, again, a seeming paradox. And let me explain that a bit. If you've ever been to like a traditional Tibetan temple, you'll know they can often be quite overwhelming in many ways and very culturally Tibetan. Like you find these large butter lamps flickering, and they're used as offerings, of course, and have a particular smell. And then particularly at night, you know, there's some statues of wrathful deities and can look a little bit scary almost and quite mysterious, actually. And yeah, this is something you'll not likely see anywhere else, you know, other Buddhist kind of flavors, other temples. And it may be kind of vaguely appealing, but is also decidedly otherworldly, and we may be a bit mystified by it, but what is it really, you know? So there's a very Tibetan side to Tibetan Buddhism. But at the same time, Tibetan Buddhism is completely also not Tibetan. And to illustrate that a little bit, I'll point back to something His Holiness the Dalai Lama often emphasizes. When asked about Tibetan Buddhism, His Holiness often mentions that, you know, what we call Tibetan Buddhism is actually the so-called Nalanda tradition. And that indicates that, you know, what we call Tibetan Buddhism is actually an authentic continuation of the classic Indian Buddhist tradition as it developed between, you know, the time when Buddha passed away, roughly about 5,000 before Christ, and around the 12th century of the Common Era. And this culture culminated in the great monastic universities, of which Nalanda was one of them. So even though what meets the eye when we wander into Tibetan Buddhist temples is actually in a way much like the tip of a vast mountain, and the body and foundation of that mountain consists partly of a scholarly, philosophical tradition that Tibetan translators have painstakingly preserved in the Tibetan language, and also guided by this philosophical tradition